Alrighty. Hi everybody, we're here. How are you? So I have bronchitis today, which is why you didn't get the video earlier. So you'll hear coughing and sneezing, and sorry about the light. There's like a weird light in my office. But let's talk about chapter 3. So you guys have been doing so well on chapters 1 and 2. So we're going to talk about chapter 3, which is your methodology. When you write your methodology, you are going to write it as such that another researcher could look at the document and see how you've done and created your experiment and could replicate that. So you're going to be really specific when writing your research methodology. And you are going to write so specifically that, again, another researcher or experimenter can look at this proposal and say, oh yeah, I know exactly how Gina did this. The first paragraph of the document is basically just a summary. You'll see in my sample that I talk about the study and I talk about how this chapter will be an explanation of the research methodology and design. And that's all you need. So you need an introduction to your study, talk about the purpose once again. Academic writing is always repetitive, and that's totally fine. And then talk about what you're going to write about in chapter 3. Okay? The section entitled Research Design and Approach. You are going to talk about your methodology there. Most of you are doing a quantitative study. So you're going to talk about quantitative studies and why you have chosen a quantitative study for this particular experiment/proposal. Now, note that reasons why are important. Go to Patton, reread why people choose quantitative methodology. John Crestwell is always great. Get some references from him and read why you should use quantitative methodology. But it's important that you tell the reader, hey, I chose this methodology and this is why. So that's really the section under Research Design and Approach. Again, I've said this again and again, don't worry about pages. All I'm looking for is a clear, well-organized research proposal. The next part of this proposal is setting and sample. And here I want you to imagine who your sample is going to be and describe to me your sample. So what are eligible participants going to be like? How many are you going to have? Don't go crazy. You can, 100 is fine, 200 is fine. Quantitative studies are always bigger than qualitative studies in terms of sample size. But, again, in this section, just, talk about your sample, talk about how they're going to be chosen, and that's good. You're good for that. Research design and approach. Here, you're going to tell me what type of quantitative study you're going to do. Is it going to be a longitudinal quantitative study? Is it going to be a comparative quantitative study? Again, go back to Patton Part A. Read about all the different sorts of studies. I believe that most of your study is going to be non-experimental quantitative. And so you can talk about that. Most of you are going to use surveys. Most of you are not going to go out and do experiments on people, which is ethically sensitive. But know that, again, under research design and approach, you're going to talk about the type of quantitative study you're going to do. Instrumentation and materials is going to be a little tricky. It's not that tricky. But what you have to do is you have to really look at what you're trying to do and then pick out a type of survey or pick out a type of questionnaire that has to do with your research proposal that you could, if you were actually doing this study, give to research participants, and it would measure your independent and dependent variable. Some of you need 2 surveys. Some of you probably have to write your own survey. But the truth is, I prefer you to get published surveys. I prefer you to get surveys from the literature because writing a survey is extra work and it's tricky. Now, once you get your surveys, your 1 or 2 surveys, okay, again, they have to measure independent variable and dependent variable in some way, then you're going to look at sort of, how reliable or valid is this survey. And that's where you see these scores like the 0.86, 0.71. Don't worry about reliability and validity too much. If you find it, great, cite it. If you don't worry about it. But I do want you to really look within the literature, find surveys that you can use within your proposal that would make sense within your proposal. A lot of times, because you've done the review of the literature, because you've done chapter 2, you kind of know which surveys that other people have used, that other researchers have used to measure independent and dependent variable. And so if you do know which surveys, and you're like, hey, that would be a great survey for my study, do use that. Try to get a copy of it. Sometimes you can't, no problem. You can just name the survey, but of course you do have to cite and reference the authors of the survey. Again, I suggest you using a published survey, but if you have to, you write one. I mean, it is extra work, and it has to obviously apply to your independent and dependent variable, but again, you have to do it, you have to do it. Next section is research question on the hypotheses, and this comes from chapter 1, and you could probably copy paste. So note that, research question is the effect of, what is the effect of blank on blank? What is the effect of the independent variable on the dependent variable? What is the effect of exercise on depression? I'm using pale as example. What is the effect of poverty on education? That's your research question. That's it. If you have one independent and one dependent variable, then what you're going to do is you're going to write your hypotheses. And if you have one independent and one dependent variable, your hypotheses, you're going to have a traditional hypothesis, an H1, and you're going to have a null hypothesis, an H0. Your traditional hypothesis is going to say there is an effect of blank on blank, and your null hypothesis is going to say there's not an effect of blank on blank. And you need to write those two, the traditional and the null hypotheses, because if you actually did your study, right, if you actually went through this whole proposal process and put it through the IRB and then did your study and wrote chapter 4 and 5, you would by the end know which hypothesis was proven, whether your null hypothesis that something didn't have an effect or your traditional hypothesis that something did have an effect. So again, one research question, because you have one independent, one dependent variable, one hypothesis, including both a null and a traditional hypothesis. So actually two, but, concerning one thing. Then this could be like a one-sentence thing. You have to define your independent variable. My independent variable is this, and my dependent variable is this. This is super important. Don't get them mixed up. I really, half the battle is really knowing and being able to clearly identify independent and dependent variable. And so don't mess that one up. You can do it. It's a one-sentence thing. It doesn't have to be fancy. Don't look at mine for that. In terms of data collection and analysis, I'm going to totally help you here. If you are doing a quantitative study, most quantitative researchers use SPSS, or Statistical Package for the Social Sciences, in order to analyze their data. There are different versions of SPSS. Take a look at the Mercy computers, use the ones that they use. I use version 22. Some people use different. And just say, I will be analyzing using Statistical Package for the Social Sciences since I am doing a quantitative study. Okay? If you were going to do a qualitative study, then you would analyze using, do you guys remember this? How do you analyze qualitative data? Think about it. You would code, right? You would analyze and organize using coding. This is important to remember for the final exam also. Quantitative is analyzed by SPSS. Qualitative, analyzed by coding. Okay, I'm trying to do this and not cough. Participant rights and ethics. In this section, you're going to talk about how you got NIH-IRB certification, which you did get, so cool. You're going to talk about how you will gain permission, like every good researcher, from the IRB board, the Institutional Review Board at Mercy College. We all know this. If you go back and you look at like the NIH IRB certification, they talk about the role of institutional review boards. After you write this proposal, we're actually going to do an IRB application for your proposal. It's going to be fake, but if you ever actually wanted to like bring this study into fruition, which I would strongly suggest, and I will be your faculty mentor, then you would write an IRB form and you would submit the IRB form with your proposal and all your consent forms to the IRB. So again, you're going to first say you gained permission from the IRB. You're going to second say that you gained an NIH certification, which you totally did. And then you're going to say that, you know, you are definitely dedicated to the protection of rights and participants using either the APA Code of Ethics, which is totally fine. That's the one that I use as a psychologist, or the ACA Code of Ethics, which is the American Counseling Association, and hopefully in your other classes you've gone over that. If not, we'll go over it at a later date. But know that, you know, you have to include IRB, NIH, research certification, and ethics code. You also have to say that your participants will be provided with a letter of consent, and there'll be a cover letter, and participation is completely voluntary. Anyone can leave for any reason at any time. And then you can say that once you've done the study, that your data will be put somewhere hidden, and usually it's 7 years, because participant data is really sacred. It's really important. Your participants give you so much information, and you want to be really careful with that data. So that's what we do there. And then you're going to write your summary, and you're going to talk about the methodology that you're going to be using. You're going to talk about the recruitment that you're going to use, like how many people you're going to recruit. And then you're going to talk about how you're going to analyze the data using SPSS. You don't have to get into stats, nothing fancy. But again, if you're doing a quantitative study, it is analyzed using SPSS. So I think that's it. I think that covers everything. This is the last big draft that you'll have to write, so you should be pretty happy. Do know that writing is always a process of writing and editing some more. I hope you've taken my comments to heart, and I hope you haven't thought I've been so critical. I know that it's hard to like work so hard in a draft and see all these comments, and you're like, oh my gosh, Gina, what do you want from me, blood? But the truth is, you know, it makes you better writers in the end. And by the time you have a finished research proposal, I promise you, you're going to be so proud of that proposal. And that could be used as your writing sample when you apply to your doctoral programs. It could be used as your writing sample when you're applying to other programs. So I know you can do this. As always, any questions, feel free to email me, feel free to call me, and I'm here for you, truly, truly. And yeah, so you got a video, yay. And I didn't cough, I only coughed once. Did I cough? I don't even know. Anyway, any questions, let me know. Thanks for your hard work. I so appreciate it so much. Okay.